Sergio Perez's recent slump and performance is now officially threatening him with his driving seat, as Helmut Marko announced that the Austrian team is making moves with Daniel Ricciardo after the Silverstone GP. It seems like all it takes for Red Bull's second driver is to have a streak of 3 bad races in order to be replaced, but there is much more behind the curtains of Perez and Verstappen's relationship. In this video, we're going through why Perez will be dropped by Red Bull and whether or not this will be a good decision for the team. Sergio Perez joined Red Bull back in 2021 and was practically a last-moment decision, largely influenced by his first career win in the last race of the 2020 season in Sakir. Perez didn't disappoint at any point during his first season with Red Bull, as his role was more than clear: help Verstappen secure the championship, something that the Dutchman did at the end of the year, largely thanks to Perez's help. However, things have changed in the previous 2 seasons, and this time it's Perez who has got the rough end of things. There seems to be a pattern of behavior that has repeated itself compared to 2022, and that's Perez threatening to fight for the championship after a couple of wins early in the season, only to go on and make a visible dip in his performance. This puts him behind Ferrari and Mercedes as well, not just Verstappen this year. However, Aston Martin is on the rise, and Perez's lead over Alonso has shrunk to just 9 points after he didn't score points in Monaco, finished P4 in Barcelona and P6 in Montreal. 3 consecutive races of missing Q3 and not even reaching the podium is something that is neither recognizable nor acceptable for a driver who is arguably the best car that has been produced in the history of Formula One. If you see Verstappen's differences with the rest of the grid, you'll notice that Perez has notched 0.8 of a second slower lap times compared to his teammate in Montreal. And the fact that he was nowhere near close to the Ferrari drivers and made no significant passes only goes to prove that he's far from where he needs to be in fighting for that second spot in the Drivers' Championship. While many were sure that Perez has what it takes to fight for the championship after the 2 wins in Baku and Jeddah this year, and being just 6 points behind his teammate, the gap has now stretched to 69 points. And even though this suits Red Bull more than you would originally anticipate, it's obvious that the team doesn't have a second driver to rely on if something goes wrong with Verstappen. At least if we're to judge after the last 3 races. Even if they do have Perez up there, I doubt that the Mexican will do anything that would favor his teammate. Something that was mandatory in the previous 2 seasons, but is now definitely a scenario we won't see happening. Although it's all smiles on the grid when the Red Bull drivers are scoring good points and winning double podiums, it's evident that the relationship between these 2 drivers has gone sour. The camp of the 2-time world champion isn't liking how Perez makes continuous threats with a championship. Therefore, Daniel Ricciardo might be the driver to solve all of the issues for the Austrian team, as he'll be officially testing in the RB19 for 3 days in the Pirelli tyre test at the Silverstone GP. This is something that would evaluate Ricciardo's situation, according to Helmut Marko, as he continued to speak about Perez's contractual situation with Red Bull, saying, "We will have Ricciardo in the car for 3 days at Silverstone during the tyre test, and then you can evaluate where Ricciardo really stands." Perez's initial goal was 2 or 3 years, which would have been more than he planned anyway. You just have to keep options for succession open. Arguably, Perez is one of the best teammates Verstappen has had, as he won 5 races with the team in just 2 full seasons and is currently racing in his 3rd one. But there is something about him that just doesn't fit with Red Bull's philosophy of signing drivers. The threats of dethroning Verstappen publicly and then disappearing out of nowhere in the early stages of the season, this is the recurring pattern from 2022. While he had the car's upgrades to blame on the RBA teams last year and said that he felt a lot distant while Max added more and more performance to it, this time it isn't the issue. Sergio Perez claimed that he feels very comfortable with the car's needs, it's just that he doesn't know how to give the car what it asks from him. Obviously, Miami was one of the most disappointing races in his career. And while he had clean air in front of him and Verstappen was far back at P9, the Dutchman was able to claim the lead very early in the race and then go on to win it in a very dominant manner. This is something that can definitely take a huge toll on your confidence. And in a time where you're claiming to be World Championship contender, it's a deal breaker for you, that's for sure. Now, the question remains whether Perez will be capable of bouncing back and returning from this massive pressure that's mounted on his shoulders. But the truth remains a harsh one. He is just not made out for the championship club. While I don't agree that he should go down the same road that Gasly and Albon did, it's worth mentioning that he was given a lot more time than these two to adjust to the RB19 and joined the Austrian squad with a lot more experience than both of Red Bull's junior drivers. So mistakes like his in the last 3 races during the qualifying sessions are just unacceptable. Christian Horner did say that Perez will perform much better, and the team is ready to stand behind him once he accepts the fact that he's there for the ultimate team's goal to finish 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship and clinch the Constructors' Championship as early as possible. However, Perez denied all of these claims, and even with a 69-point deficit to the championship leader, he claimed that he's still in for the fight. Daniel Ricciardo is probably sitting in a corner, rubbing his hands with an evil smile on his face, because if you were to ask him, this would be the fairy tale ending of his career, finishing it all with the team that gave him an opportunity to be the driver he is today. Although Red Bull needs to ask themselves one crucial question: is the swap between Perez and Ricciardo worth it for them? After what the Honey Badger had to go through in his last 2 seasons as a full-time F1 driver and 1 year off the sport, there is no doubt that he could deliver good results again. Just look at what Hülkenberg is doing with Haas, at least in the qualifying sessions, after being 3 years out of the sport. But this is Red Bull we're talking about, and you have to constantly beat drivers who are in top-notch form, such as both Ferrari drivers and Mercedes as well. This might seem to make Ricciardo take the alternative approach, and if tests in Silverstone go well, then he might take over the seat for the remainder of the 2023 season and replace Perez in 2024. It's definitely devastating to see Marco saying that Perez has already achieved what he wanted to do with Red Bull. And considering how good of a driver he was in his first year with Red Bull, it's evident that the team is mistreating him badly right now. However, I can't help but note that this is something Red Bull drivers post to themselves. And you cannot win titles by being the good guy and playing the Good Samaritan role week in and week out. If we're to hate on Verstappen for his behavior, he might be right to do so. But the guy is a generational talent, and there aren't many drivers who could beat him in the same car right now. So if you are to make those claims after 2 wins from the first 4 races, you need to continue the form in the upcoming races as well, and anything below P2 is considered a loss for you, considering the fact that Verstappen is demolishing the competition with more than a 1-second advantage during the qualifying session in Montreal. Still, Red Bull will have a difficult task in front of them. As Marco said, they're not that concerned about that second seat as long as Verstappen has this dominant lead ahead and is securing both of their championships with ease. But one thing that not even Marco and Horner could guarantee is the stability of their reign, and things could quickly turn south for the Austrian squad, which is why they need a solid number 2 driver, so that when something goes wrong with Verstappen, they'll be able to maximize the effort with the other driver out there. As of now, Perez is definitely not that kind of driver, which is why the future of this seat is under a huge threat. And Ricciardo is the driver who might cause yet another tectonic shakeup in the drivers' lineup for the 2nd consecutive season.